The heavy steel door swings open and Valentina Reynolds stumbles through at 2:14 in the morning, her body bent at an angle that suggests something inside her has already broken. She is 28 years old but looks decades older. Her dark hair, once carefully pinned, hangs matted with blood and sweat plastered to a face so pale it appears almost translucent. Her torn denim jacket slips from one shoulder, revealing a deep gash across her ribs, the wound still bleeding, still weeping red into the fabric of her white tank top, her fingers pressed uselessly against the cut as if her hand alone could hold her body together. The underground poker room swallows her in a wall of sensory assault. Cigar smoke hangs thick in the air like a living thing, coiling around the amber lights suspended above the tables. The smell of it, bitter, acrid, expensive, mingles with whiskey and something else. Money. The peculiar metallic scent of wealth, sharp and cold. On the green felt tables, poker chips click against each other with soft, rhythmic precision. The click, click, click of a world continuing as if nothing matters. And through the single window set high in the concrete wall, frost clings to the glass like fingernails, revealing the Mississippi River beyond, frozen solid under the clear winter sky, starlight reflecting off ice with surgical intensity. 20 men in suits that cost more than everything Valentina has ever owned go absolutely still. The conversations stop. The cards freeze mid-deal. Even the ice sounds cease. What was movement becomes stillness. What was life becomes a held breath. At the center table, Nicholas Conti sits like a general surveying a battlefield he has already claimed. He is 42 years old, his body built from a life of absolute control, broad shoulders beneath a white silk shirt open at the neck, dark hair silvered at the temples, a scar running from the outer corner of his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade drawn across ivory. His cufflinks are silver, catching the low amber light and fragmenting it into scattered pieces. His dark eyes lift slowly from his cards. When he looks at someone, that person understands, without any words being spoken, that he is measuring them for a coffin. Valentina's knees buckle. Her legs simply stop working, and her body begins its descent toward the polished concrete floor. She catches herself with her palm slammed flat against the cold surface, her ribs screaming in protest, but she does not fall completely. She hovers there, suspended between standing and collapse, like a broken puppet held up by prayer. She has $5 in her pocket. 5. Everything else she owns is in a backpack abandoned 3 blocks away during the chase, shoved beneath a rusted fire escape when the footsteps came too close and running seemed smarter than hiding. Please, she gasps. Her voice comes out like something shattered, like glass breaking inside a closed room. Marcus Webb, he's going to kill me. I need someone to call the police. He's hunting me. He has people. Police people. Corrupt ones. I can't. She cannot finish the sentence. The pain blooming across her ribs cuts off her words, and she falls the rest of the way to the floor. Her bleeding palms make contact with concrete. Nothing happens for a moment. The world holds its breath. Then Rocco moves. He is tall, nearly 6'4", with shoulders like a linebacker and eyes like stone. His hand goes to the gun at his waist, and Sal moves with him, a mirror image, slightly shorter but somehow more dangerous, his face scarred on the left side in a pattern that suggests extreme violence once visited his existence. Nicholas Conti does not move. He does not raise his hand. He does not speak. He simply watches, and that watching, that assessment, is more terrifying than any violence could be. His eyes have moved from Valentina to something beyond her, to some calculation happening only in the darkest corner of his mind. The steel door opens again. The sound of it opening is the worst sound Valentina has heard in her entire life, because she thinks it is Marcus. She thinks the chase has ended, that her hiding place has been found, that the debt she cannot repay is about to be collected in blood and broken bones. She tries to move backward, tries to crawl away, but pain pins her to the ground like a butterfly to a board. But the man who enters is not Marcus Webb. It is Victor, Conti's head of security, tall and broad and moving with a kind of purpose that comes from absolute certainty. His dark eyes scan the room, register the woman bleeding on the floor, and then settle on Nicholas Conti with the calm expression of someone about to deliver information that will change everything. And beside Victor, held by his large, scarred hand, is a 9-year-old boy. The boy has sandy hair that falls across his forehead in a way that suggests he has been running, or that someone has run their fingers through it in fear. His eyes are wide, dark brown, scanning the room with the desperate energy of a child searching for a face he recognizes. His small frame is wrapped in a grey hoodie 2 sizes too large, and his sneakers, when they touch the ground, carry him forward with the kind of uncertain steps that children use when they are afraid. His eyes find Valentina's crumpled form on the concrete floor. "Papa," the boy shouts, the word exploding from his chest with all the force of a declaration, a claim, a desperate reaching out into the world. He breaks free from Victor's grasp with the strength of a child who has made a decision. His small legs carry him across the poker room, past the men in their expensive suits, past the tables laden with money and cards and the residue of games that determine the fates of lesser men. He drops to his knees beside Valentina's bleeding body, and when he speaks again, his voice is small and precise and carries the weight of an entire world's concern. "Miss Val! What happened? Why are you bleeding?" The room does not simply freeze. The room dies. Every man in that space has worked for Nicholas Conti for years, some for decades. They have seen him order executions with the same tone others used to order coffee. They have witnessed him move through the world like a force of nature, collecting power and fear and loyalty in equal measure. They have learned that emotion is a luxury he cannot afford, that attachment is a wound that will never be permitted to open. But in this moment, something shifts in Nicholas Conti's face that they have never witnessed before. It is not dramatic. It is not explosive. It is a micro-movement, a tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible change in the angle of his jaw, a hand that lifts slightly from the green felt table as if reaching toward something precious that might break if touched too firmly. He knows who this boy is. The sound of Valentina's breathing, shallow, pained, frightened, fills the silence that follows. Her eyes move from Noah's face to Nicholas Conti's, and in that moment, as their eyes meet across the poker room, she has no idea what she is about to discover. She has no idea that the boy kneeling beside her is not simply a child from the shelter where she works. She has no idea that his name is Noah Conti, that he was stolen at birth and hidden away for 9 years, that the woman who raised him, who she thought was his mother, is a thief of the deepest kind. She has no idea that the man sitting at the center table, the man with silver cufflinks and a scar and eyes like a winter storm, is about to become the most dangerous force in her life, or the most necessary. She has no idea that her act of saving this boy 2 months ago, when she pulled him from a burning building and held him in her arms while the sirens wailed in the distance, has made her the only person alive who understands what Nicholas Conti lost. But what changes everything, what cracks the carefully constructed wall of his world, is not the blood. It is the way Noah touches her face with his small hand, wiping away a tear she did not know she was crying, and says the only words that could ever penetrate the armor of a man like this. "You're safe now. I'm here." Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone you love and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. The next part of this story will shatter your heart. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 2 months earlier, when Valentina Reynolds was still invisible to the world, still fighting to hold onto the last shred of her dignity, still unaware that her life was about to change completely. Her alarm clock reads 5:56 in the morning. The alarm clock reads 5:24 in the morning. Valentina Reynolds does not move. She lies in the back seat of her 2004 Honda Civic, her breath visible in the freezing air, windows fogged with condensation so thick she cannot see the world outside. The car smells like stale coffee and the particular cold that comes from sleeping in metal and glass, from a body that has learned to curl into itself. She wears 2 sweaters and a down jacket that lost its stuffing 3 winters ago. Her lips are pale. Her fingers are numb. She has been awake for 15 minutes but cannot bring herself to move, because movement means the cold will find her again, means the day will demand something from her that she is not sure she can give. The parking lot behind the laundromat is empty. 3 other cars sit abandoned in the pre-dawn darkness, but she does not look at them. She knows who sleeps in those vehicles. She knows their names, their stories, their debts. She is one of them now. At 27 years old, looking 35, Valentina Reynolds owns nothing but this car, the clothes she is wearing, and a second outfit folded on the passenger seat beside her. $5 in her pocket. No phone plan. No insurance. No address. No future that she can see from this angle, from this car, from this particular moment in the darkness. She sits up slowly. The steering wheel is ice under her palms. She turns the key and the engine protests, a sound like something dying, but the engine catches. The heater takes 3 minutes to produce warmth that is barely warm at all, just less cold than the alternative. While the car warms, she retrieves her second outfit from the passenger seat, a pair of black pants and a long-sleeved shirt that say Hope Haven Shelter on the back in faded lettering. The fabric is thin. It has been washed 200 times. She changes in the cramped back seat, her movements careful and practiced, the way someone moves when they have become accustomed to hiding their body even from themselves. At 6:15 in the morning, she drives 7 blocks to the nearest gas station. The fluorescent lights inside make her wince. She uses the bathroom, which smells of industrial cleaner and human desperation, and washes her face with soap that dries her skin so tight it feels like paper about to tear. She has become very careful with water. Careful with time. Careful with every resource because she has learned that resources do not multiply, they only diminish. The mirror above the sink shows her a face she barely recognizes. Dark eyes with purple shadows beneath them. Hair that has lost its shine. Cheekbones that have become too sharp. She brushes her teeth with her finger because she cannot afford a toothbrush, and the clerk has stopped asking her to buy something when she uses the restroom. He has learned to look away. Kindness and invisibility have become the same thing for her. By 7:02 in the morning, she arrives at Hope Haven Shelter on Dauphine Street. The building is a converted mansion from the 1890s, all crumbling brick and Victorian arches and windows that rattle when the wind moves. Evelyn Blackwell owns it. Evelyn Blackwell, 56 years old, a widow with a silver bob haircut and designer pantsuits that probably cost more than the 6 months of rent Valentina used to pay when she had an apartment, owns this place and 3 others like it across New Orleans. She arrived at Hope Haven every Tuesday and Thursday morning to inspect the books, count the donations, and accept the praise of the board members who call her a saint. A saint. The word makes Valentina's jaw tighten. Inside the kitchen, Valentina begins preparing breakfast for the children. Oatmeal, because it is cheap and fills stomachs and can be made in bulk. Toast with the free peanut butter the food bank delivers. Apples from the donation box. Coffee for the staff and juice for the kids. The kitchen is warm. This is the only reason she volunteers here instead of somewhere else, somewhere with less history, less complication. The warmth. And the children. Mostly the children. By 7:45, they begin to arrive. 32 children this morning, ranging from 4 years old to 16. They file in with the quiet of children who have learned not to expect much, have learned that noise draws attention and attention brings punishment or indifference, which is sometimes worse. Valentina sets plates in front of them, and she watches their faces change as they eat, watch them soften for the length of a meal. This is her job. She volunteers here 5 days a week in exchange for 2 meals and permission to use the office shower once a week when Evelyn is not inspecting. She will never tell anyone that she lives in her car. She will never tell anyone that the dinner she eats here is the only meal she will have all day. At 8:30, Evelyn Blackwell arrives. She moves through the shelter the way a general surveys a battlefield. Her pantsuit is cream-colored. Her nails are manicured. Her shoes click against the tile floor, and every child at the breakfast table stops moving for a moment, a small hesitation, an instinct that teaches them that certain people carry the weight of judgment. Evelyn walks directly to Valentina, who is clearing plates from the table where the youngest children sit. "Valentina, dear," Evelyn says, her voice like honey poured over broken glass. "You work so hard. It is truly admirable. I worry about you, though. You live in that car, don't you? I have noticed. Valentina does not look up from the plate she is holding. It is temporary, Mrs. Blackwell. Of course, dear. Of course it is. Evelyn touches her shoulder, and Valentina feels her skin contract. I have a proposition. A real opportunity for you. If you would come to my office this evening, I can get you into proper housing. All I need is your social security number for employment paperwork. Just a formality, you understand. We can get you on the books as assistant manager. Real wages. Real documentation. Real security. Valentina sets down the plate. She turns to face Evelyn, and something in the older woman's expression shifts. Calculation. Hunger. The way a predator looks at prey that is only beginning to understand that it is wounded. I will think about it, Valentina says quietly. Do, dear. Do think about it. You cannot live in that car forever. Evelyn clicks away, toward the office, and Valentina exhales slowly. She has no idea why Evelyn's presence frightens her more than hunger does, more than the cold at night does. She only knows that accepting Evelyn's offer would be like signing something she cannot read, pledging something she cannot reclaim. There is a weight to Evelyn's kindness that does not feel like kindness at all. By 9 o'clock, the breakfast service is over. Valentina begins cleaning the kitchen, and Noah Conti enters through the back door, carrying the donation bins that need to be sorted. He is 9 years old, with sandy hair and the kind of quiet that belongs to children who have learned to disappear into corners. He has been at Hope Haven for 3 weeks. No one knows where he came from. A woman brought him in late at night and filled out a form with an illegible signature, left him with a bag containing 2 changes of clothes and no explanation. Since then, he has not spoken much. But he has gravitated toward Valentina in the way certain wounded animals gravitate toward the gentlest person in the room. Can I help? Noah asks, his voice barely audible. Always, Valentina says. You can sort the cans by expiration date. Put the new ones in the back and the older ones in the front. They work in silence. The kitchen fills with the sounds of running water, the clink of cans, the small movements of 2 people learning to exist in the same space without demanding anything from each other. After 20 minutes, Noah speaks. Miss Val, do you have a family? Valentina's hand still. She is holding a can of green beans. I did, sweetie. Not anymore. Where did they go? Some of them went away. Some of them. She pauses. She has become very careful with her words around children. Some of them chose not to stay. Noah nods as if this makes perfect sense. He returns to sorting cans. I like when you are here. The other volunteers are nice, but you are different. You do not pretend. She looks at him, this small boy who seems to carry his own weight of secrets, and feels something crack inside her chest. She does not answer because she cannot trust her voice not to break. At 3:22 in the afternoon, her phone buzzes in her pocket. She pulls it out and sees 17 missed calls. All from Marcus Webb. The name alone is enough to make her hands shake. Marcus Webb, 34 years old, her ex-boyfriend from a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. A man with fists and a temper and friends in the police department who will never arrest him, no matter how many times she files a report. A man who believes that her body belongs to him, that her money belongs to him, that her life belongs to him because once, for 3 years, she was stupid enough to think she loved him. She blocks the number again. But blocking numbers is like trying to stop a flood with a teaspoon. He will call from other phones. He will find other ways. At 5 o'clock, she leaves Hope Haven and drives to the edge of the French Quarter, where she parks her car behind an abandoned warehouse and waits for the sun to set. She has learned not to drive through the city in the evening if she can avoid it. The car makes her visible, and visibility is dangerous. Better to stay still. Better to wait until the night is fully dark, until everyone who matters has gone home to their real homes, and then she can drive back to the laundromat parking lot and climb into her seat and lock the doors and try to sleep. But at 6:30, a truck pulls up beside her car. a Ford F-150, primer gray, the engine rumbling like a threat. Marcus Webb steps out. His construction worker's frame fills the space between the vehicles. His face is the face she used to kiss, before she understood what those hands were capable of. He walks to her window and leans down, his arms crossed across his chest like he owns the very air around her. "You can't hide forever, Val," he says, his voice low and steady and terrifying in its calm. "You owe me $47,000. 5 days. That's all you get." She tries to start the car, but his hand comes through the window and grabs her wrist. His grip is a cage made of bone and cruelty. She pulls, and for a moment they are locked in a struggle that feels like everything that has ever been broken in her, all compressed into a single point of force. Then she yanks the door open, wrenches her arm free, and runs. She runs 3 blocks before she stops, breathing like something hunted. She gets back to her car from a different direction, driving through neighborhoods she does not recognize, taking turns at random until she is certain he is not following. By 9:19 in the evening, she is parked 3 miles from Hope Haven, 3 miles from anywhere Marcus would think to look. She sleeps with the doors locked and the pepper spray in her hand. The stars overhead are sharp as diamonds, cutting through the windshield like blades of ice. Somewhere in the city, in a penthouse overlooking the Mississippi River, Nicholas Conti is making decisions about money and territory and men. Somewhere, Evelyn Blackwell is reviewing the shelter's files and writing a plan that will change everything. Somewhere, a boy named Noah is sleeping in a cot at Hope Haven, dreaming of a woman he barely knows but somehow trusts with the broken parts of his heart. And Valentina Reynolds lies in the back seat of a car worth less than what Marcus Webb claims she owes, and she tries to believe that tomorrow will be different than today. She tries and fails and tries again, because that is all she has left. That is all anyone has left when the world has decided they are nobody. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus Webb's threats echoed through the parking lot, 3 weeks since Valentina Reynolds learned what it meant to be hunted. The shelter where she volunteered as a night coordinator paid almost nothing, but it was honest work, and the children needed her. On a winter night when frost coated every surface of New Orleans like a skin of ice, she arrived at Hope Haven at 11:41 in the evening because she had left her only jacket, a thin navy thing with a torn pocket, hanging on the back of her office chair that morning. The moment she stepped through the front entrance, she smelled smoke. Not the clean smoke of a fireplace. Not the familiar kitchen smoke when someone burned dinner. This was different. This was the smell of something dying, something being consumed by heat and hunger. Her stomach dropped. The hallway was clear, but when she rounded the corner toward the east wing, she saw it, a ribbon of orange light creeping beneath the rec room door, growing thicker, brighter, more alive with every second that passed. She did not think. She moved. The alarm was screaming now, a mechanical wail that cut through the building like a blade. Sprinklers should have activated, should have flooded the hallways with water and chemical suppressant, but they hung dry and useless from the ceiling. The fire had reached the main office already, had done something to the systems that were supposed to protect this place. Smoke was rolling through the hallway now, thick and black and poisonous, choking out the clean air. Valentina ran toward the children's dormitory. The heat was a physical force pushing back against her, pressing against her chest like something trying to keep her from moving forward. Her eyes watered. Her lungs burned with each breath she pulled in. But she could hear them, small voices crying, calling for help, calling for her. The rec room door was locked from the outside. She twisted the handle, pulled, and it gave way with a crack of splintering wood. 6 children huddled near the window, their faces streaked with soot and tears. Maya, 7 years old with tight curls and a birthmark on her shoulder. James, 8, who never spoke above a whisper. Sophie, 6. 3 younger ones clustered together like frightened animals. And Noah. Noah, 9 years old, sandy-haired and serious, the boy who had arrived at the shelter 2 months ago with no memory of before and no family to claim him. He stood closest to the advancing flames, frozen in the terrible paralysis that comes when fear overwhelms the body's ability to move. Valentina grabbed Maya's hand. "We're leaving. Now. All of us. Hold hands." Do not let go. Do you understand? Her voice was steady, even as her hands trembled. She pulled them toward the back exit, the one that led through the laundry room and out into the frozen yard. 5 children. 5 small bodies moving behind her like a line of ducklings, their hands locked together, their breath coming in panicked gasps as smoke filled their lungs. She got them out. She pulled all 5 children through the laundry room door, across the threshold, into the brutal cold of the November night. Their feet hit the frozen grass. She counted them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All of them. All except one. Noah. She had turned back because she had to. Because leaving him behind was not a choice that existed in any version of the world she could accept. The alarm was louder now, the smoke thicker, rolling down the hallway in waves like something alive and hunting. She ran back through it, her eyes streaming, her throat raw, squinting against the sting of burning chemicals in the air. Noah was still in the rec room. He was standing in the exact same spot, his small frame silhouetted against the growing light of the flames. The fire had reached the east wall. Paint bubbled and blackened. Wallpaper curled and fell like shed skin. The stairwell beyond the rec room door was impassable now, a wall of orange and black that made the air shimmer and distort. Noah! Come here! Now! Her voice cracked with desperation. The boy looked at her but did not move. Panic had turned him to stone. She crossed the room, grabbed his shoulders, and shook him gently. Look at me. Look at my eyes. We have to go. Right now. Can you run? His eyes were wide and unseeing, pupils dilated with terror. She picked him up. He was small for 9, light enough to carry but solid enough that it took all her strength to hold him against her body as she turned back toward the laundry room. The window. The side window that led to the yard would be faster than navigating back through the smoke-filled hallways. She ran toward it. Her jacket was hanging on a chair nearby. She grabbed it, wrapped it around Noah's face and shoulders to protect him from the smoke, and fumbled with the window latch. It stuck. The wood was old and swollen from decades of dampness. She pulled harder, and her hand slipped. Smoke was pouring into the room now, thick and choking, and the temperature was rising until the air itself felt solid and hostile. The window gave way with a screech of protesting wood. She climbed through first, dropping 3 feet to the frozen ground below, her knees taking the impact. Pain shot through her legs, but she felt it distantly, as though it belonged to someone else. She turned immediately back to the window. Noah's small face appeared, still wrapped in her jacket. She pulled him through, his body sliding over the sill, and then he was falling into her arms and they were both on the ground, rolling across the frozen grass, away from the window, away from the building. A fire truck was pulling into the driveway, siren screaming, lights cutting through the darkness in urgent sweeps of red and white. Firefighters in heavy gear were unloading equipment. Paramedics were running toward the building. Everything was happening very fast and very slowly at the same time. Noah was coughing. Not normal coughing, violent, convulsive coughing that bent his small body double. His lips were taking on a bluish tinge. His eyes were wide with panic and lacking oxygen, lacking the ability to pull air into lungs filled with smoke and fluid. He was choking on what his body was trying to expel. Valentina knew CPR. She had taken the certification course 3 years ago when she first volunteered at the shelter. The knowledge lived in her hands even if her mind was foggy with shock and smoke inhalation. She positioned Noah on his side, one arm supporting his head, and performed back blows, sharp, deliberate strikes between his shoulder blades, aimed at dislodging whatever was blocking his airway. Nothing came up. He coughed harder, a sound like something breaking, like something tearing apart inside his small chest. She rolled him onto his back, placed the heel of her hand just below his rib cage, and performed abdominal thrusts, pushing upward and inward with controlled force, trying to force air up through his blocked airway. Once. Twice. 3 times. On the 4th thrust, Noah's body convulsed and he coughed up a spray of black fluid, smoke condensed into liquid, phlegm mixed with mucus, the substance of his own body's panicked response to poison. It hit the frozen ground and steamed in the cold air. He gasped. His small mouth opened wide and his lungs pulled in a breath of clean, cold air. Then another. Then he was crying, his whole body shaking, his breath coming in ragged hiccups, but he was breathing. The bluish tint was fading from his lips. Color was returning to his face. His airway was open. His lungs were working. "You're okay," Valentina whispered, and her voice broke completely. "You're okay, Noah. You're safe." She pulled him against her chest, and he wrapped his arms around her neck with the desperate strength of a child who had been closer to death than children ever should be. His small body trembled against hers. A paramedic approached, a woman in a dark uniform with calm eyes. "Let me check him." "Can you set him down?" Valentina laid Noah on the stretcher they had wheeled over. They were asking him questions, checking his oxygen saturation, listening to his lungs with a stethoscope. His coloring was improving. His breathing was stabilizing. The crisis was passing. Valentina sat on the frozen grass, and only then did she realize she was bleeding. The paramedic who had been examining Noah looked at her. "You're hurt. Come on, let me get you examined." She looked down. Her ribs on the left side were open to the air, skin gaping where it had torn. She did not remember this happening. She did not remember being cut. Had it been the window frame? Had she scraped against something in the scramble to escape? The paramedic was already calling over a colleague. They helped her to a second stretcher. They were asking her questions, her name, any allergies, how she was injured, and she was answering automatically, mechanically, while her eyes stayed fixed on Noah being loaded into an ambulance. That was when the black SUV pulled up. It came through the gate without hesitation, moving with the kind of purpose that made firefighters and paramedics step out of its way. The back doors opened and two men in dark suits emerged. One was older, broad-shouldered, with silver at his temples and a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye toward his jawline. The other was younger, with an earpiece pressed to his ear and an expression that suggested he was accustomed to making people nervous. They approached the paramedics who were preparing to transport Noah. The older man showed credentials. Valentina could not read them from where she lay on her stretcher. She could only see the paramedics' expressions change: surprise, confusion, deference. One of them was nodding. They were preparing to hand Noah over. "Wait!" Valentina tried to sit up. A paramedic put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Where are you taking him?" "Noah. Noah, where are they taking you?" The boy looked back at her, his small face terrified and confused, and then he was being placed into the black SUV by men with no warmth in their faces. "You need to lie still," the paramedic said. "You have a serious laceration. We need to get you to the hospital." But Valentina was watching the SUV drive away, its red taillights disappearing into the darkness of New Orleans at midnight. The east wing of Hope Haven was fully engulfed now. The flames had reached the roof. Firefighters were pouring water onto the building, but the fire was already winning. It was consuming the structure from the inside, eating through walls and doors and everything that had been carefully arranged to keep children safe. A Mercedes pulled up near the gate. The driver's side door opened and Evelyn Blackwell stepped out into the cold night. She was wearing a cashmere coat that probably cost more than everything Valentina had ever owned, her silver hair perfectly arranged, her face arranged into an expression of concerned dismay. She approached the fire chief, and Valentina watched her speak in low tones, her words inaudible from where the paramedics were wrapping her ribs in gauze and tape. But Valentina could read her face. And the fire chief's expression as he listened. And the almost imperceptible nod he gave in response to something Evelyn said, something about electrical systems, about faulty wiring, about the tragedy of old buildings with outdated infrastructure. Valentina's stomach twisted. Her hands went cold. She looked at where Hope Haven was burning, destroying everything, and she thought of Noah's small face disappearing into that black SUV. She had lost him. She had saved him, and then she had lost him anyway. She had lost the shelter, her job, the only place in the world where she had felt like her work mattered. She had lost her jacket, left behind in smoke and flames. She had lost everything she had worked for, everything she had built. The paramedic was asking if she was ready to go to the hospital. She nodded, numb, and they wheeled her toward the ambulance. Her last view of Hope Haven was of the roof collapsing inward, of the structure giving way to the hungry flames, of the ashes beginning to fall like snow onto the frozen ground. She had nothing. $5 in her car. No job. No shelter. A laceration across her ribs that would require stitches she could not afford. And Noah was gone, taken by men in suits who appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the night. What she did not know was that those men worked for Nicholas Conti, and that 6 weeks earlier, a fingerprint database in a locked office building in New Orleans had flagged a match for a boy named Noah. A match that had been waiting for 9 years, ever since the night a newborn had been stolen from a hospital nursery, ever since a man had stopped living and started only waiting, only searching, only keeping a room exactly as it had been the day his son was taken. The rooftop of the Conti compound stretched out beneath a sky so black it seemed to swallow the stars. Valentina stood at the railing, her fingers numb against the frozen metal, the Mississippi River 50 feet below catching what little light the city offered. Ice crystals hung in the air like suspended glass. She had not slept in 37 hours. Her mind kept replaying the moment the roof of Hope Haven collapsed inward, kept seeing the flames consume everything she had built, kept hearing the silence after Noah's hand slipped from hers as those men in black suits spirited him away into darkness. $5 remained in her car. $5 and a laceration across her ribs that throbbed with every breath. Her jacket was ash. Her job was gone. Her identity, stolen by Evelyn Blackwell's forged documents and federal grant applications, no longer belonged to her. Marcus Webb still hunted her across the city. She had seen the posts on social media, the photographs of her old car, the $5,000 bounty he had offered to anyone who could deliver her location. Detective Morrison had called, his voice tight with desperation. Conti's men had answered instead. Rocco had spoken into the phone with a voice like ice cracking. Tell your boss to stay out of police business. Marcus Webb has rights. The pause that followed stretched like a chasm. Then Rocco's final words, each one delivered with surgical precision. Your career is over, Morrison. Check your email. By morning, every federal investigator in Louisiana had received recordings of Morrison accepting bribes from Marcus Webb. The detective's life had collapsed in 4 hours. Valentina's hands trembled as she gripped the railing. Not from cold. From the weight of it all. From understanding that even though Conti had promised to protect her, promised that everything would change, Marcus could still find her. Evelyn could still testify that Valentina had been the one who stole from the shelter. The authorities could still come. The river below looked merciful in its darkness, inviting in its silence. She thought of how easy it would be to simply let go, to stop running, to stop fighting. Her fingers loosened against the railing. The metal burned against her palms. Then a small voice cut through the night. Miss Val? Are you okay? She turned and saw Noah standing in the doorway, wrapped in pajamas too large for his 9-year-old frame, clutching a stuffed bear that had been washed so many times its color had faded to something between gray and beige. His hair was sleep mussed. His eyes were wide and worried in a way no child should ever be worried about an adult. He had seen the fire. He had seen her bleeding. He had learned only hours ago that the man he thought was a stranger was actually his father, that his entire life until this moment had been a lie constructed by a woman who had stolen him from a hospital nursery 9 years ago. Valentina knelt in front of him, and Noah walked into her arms. She could feel him shaking. I'm okay, sweetie, she whispered into his hair, and she meant it with a clarity that shocked her. She was okay because this boy existed. Because he had come looking for her instead of staying safe in his bed. Because even in all this darkness, he had chosen to check on her. I promise. Behind Noah, Nicholas Conti stood in the doorway. He wore nothing but dark trousers and an open white shirt, and the scar running from his eye to his cheekbone caught the light from inside. He looked at Valentina, really looked at her, and saw everything. He saw the moment she had almost let go. He saw that she was drowning. He did not speak. He simply nodded. A nod that meant he understood. A nod that meant she was not alone. She nodded back, her hand still resting on Noah's shoulder. The night dissolved into those three people standing in the frozen darkness, the river rushing past below them, the city sleeping around them. In that moment, something shifted inside Valentina's chest. Not hope. Not yet. But the absence of drowning. The presence of a reason to hold on. When dawn arrived, it brought the sound of engines. 12 men in tactical gear moved through the pre-dawn darkness like ghosts, like shadows given purpose and velocity. Black vans pulled away from the Conti compound in perfect synchronization. Rocco and Sal led the first team, their footsteps silent against the concrete as they entered Marcus Webb's apartment building on Tupatulas Street. The building was old, the kind of place where nobody asked questions, where money changed hands and silence was guaranteed. Marcus had been sleeping on a mattress on the floor, his phone glowing beside him on the nightstand, dozens of notifications from his surveillance network, from the people he had paid to watch for Valentina, from the loan sharks pressing him for interest payments on debts that had grown like cancers. Rocco did not knock. The door opened at his touch, the lock destroyed by a man with a sledgehammer who had come up the stairs 3 seconds before. Marcus woke screaming, his body jerking upright as hands grabbed his wrists. He swung, tried to fight, there were 3 of them, then 4, holding him down. Rocco caught his right wrist and twisted with the kind of efficient brutality that comes from years of never hesitating. The sound of bone breaking echoed through the apartment like a gunshot in the silence. Marcus screamed again. His wrist hung at an angle that made the surrounding officers wince. They dragged him down the stairs with his feet dragging behind him, his broken wrist cradled against his body, he screaming turning to incoherent pleading. The van swallowed him. The sun had not yet risen. The docks of New Orleans are places where things disappear. Where containers are loaded onto ships bound for ports that do not ask questions. Where men understand that some conversations never happen, some transactions never occurred, some people simply cease to exist. Nicholas Conti stood beside a shipping container as Marcus Webb was delivered to him, suspended between Rocco and Sal, his face streaked with tears and blood from where he had bitten his own lip. When Marcus saw Conti, something inside him broke completely. He collapsed to his knees, and the tears came like a child's tears, like the tears of someone who understood, finally and too late, that he had made a catastrophic mistake. His voice was barely a whisper. "Please," he said. "I'll forgive the debt. I'll disappear. I'll leave the country. Please. Just please." Conti's voice was flat, mechanical, devoid of every human emotion. "You put your hands on her for 2 years. You made her bleed. You made her sleep in her car in winter while you bought cocaine and paid for women in hotel rooms. You made her count her money to decide if she could afford to eat on a given day." He stepped closer, and Marcus flinched. Death would be too quick. Too easy. Too merciful. Rocco and Sal exchanged a look. They had worked for Nicholas Conti for 19 years combined, and in all that time, they had never heard him speak with this level of controlled rage. This was not the voice of a man ordering a simple execution. This was the voice of a man delivering a sentence far worse than death. Marcus was handed over to the Marcello family within the hour. The Marcellos, a crew Marcus had testified against in a federal plea deal 5 years earlier, had been waiting for this moment. They dragged him screaming into the back of a container. No one who works the docks heard him leave. He was never seen again. At 6:51 in the morning, with the sun just beginning to break across the New Orleans skyline, federal agents arrived at Evelyn Blackwell's estate in the Garden District. 17 agents, 3 vehicles, and a warrant signed by a federal magistrate who had read through 47 pages of forensic evidence detailing arson, fraud, identity theft, and systematic embezzlement of charitable funds meant for vulnerable children. Evelyn Blackwell was arrested on her front lawn in her silk pajamas and a cashmere robe that cost more than Valentina's car. News cameras caught every moment. She was placed in handcuffs by a female agent with no sympathy in her expression. Her designer shoes clicked against the stone driveway as they led her toward the federal vehicle. Her attorney was not present. Her son had refused to take her calls. The evidence Conti had provided to federal investigators was meticulously organized. Security footage showed her in the basement of Hope Haven with a professional arsonist, showed her lighting the accelerant herself, showed her glancing at her phone to confirm the fire had started before walking out into the street and calling 911. Bank records showed transfers from the Children's Trust Fund to an offshore account in her name. Handwriting analysis confirmed her signature on the false grant applications. Identity documents showed the names and social security numbers she had stolen, including Valentina's. The federal charges were federal charges: arson, fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, conspiracy. 40 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 25 years. Her son, terrified of sharing his mother's fate, agreed to testify against her in exchange for immunity. Within a single news cycle, Evelyn Blackwell's reputation was systematically destroyed. Every charitable board she chaired severed ties immediately. Her name was removed from 3 buildings. Her photograph appeared on every news outlet in Louisiana alongside the word alleged arsonist in letters that seemed to burn against the screen. By noon, she was in a federal holding facility awaiting trial. By evening, she was a footnote in a news story that was already moving on to the next scandal, the next crime, the next victim. Valentina watched the footage in Conti's office, sitting in a leather chair that had never been designed for someone like her, watching her abuser disappear into the machinery of federal justice. She watched her thief, the woman who had tried to erase her identity, being led away in handcuffs. And she felt something crack open inside her chest. Not satisfaction. Not exactly. But the feeling of weight beginning to lift. The feeling of being able to breathe. Conti stood by the window, looking out at the city, his hands in his pockets. Noah slept on the sofa beside Valentina, his head resting against her leg, his breathing deep and even and innocent. Outside, the rain had started to fall, a gentle rain that seemed to wash the city clean. "It is finished," Conti said quietly. Valentina did not respond. She simply reached down and placed her hand on Noah's hair, feeling the warmth of him, the realness of him. She had saved this boy from fire. She had not lost him. He was here. He was breathing. He was safe. 3 weeks after the machinery of federal justice had swallowed Marcus Webb whole, Valentina Reynolds stood in the doorway of a 2-bedroom apartment on Dauphine Street, holding the lease in hands that were still learning how to stop shaking. The apartment was small, maybe 800 square feet, with hardwood floors that creaked when you walked across them and windows that faced a quiet courtyard where azaleas were beginning to bloom. It was not much. It was everything. Nicholas Conti had arranged it through a property manager, insisting it was a job, not a gift. She would be Noah's full-time caregiver and tutor. $60,000 a year. Benefits. Her own apartment adjacent to his residence, close enough to reach him in minutes if he needed her, far enough that she had a life separate from his shadow. "I don't have a degree," Valentina had said when he first offered, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. "I'm not qualified to raise him. To teach him. I'm nobody. I was a waitress sleeping in a car 6 months ago." Nicholas had stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he had built and controlled through intelligence and fear and the absolute certainty that he would never beg anyone for anything. He turned to face her, and in his storm-gray eyes she saw something she had never seen before. Not softness, exactly. But the beginning of something that might, over time, become that. "You saved his life," he said, his voice deep and solid like an oath. "You pulled him from fire with your own hands. You are the only person he trusts. That is the only qualification that matters." She had taken the job. The first night in the apartment, Valentina lay on a real bed, a bed that was hers, not borrowed or salvaged, and wept so quietly that the sound barely disturbed the silence. She had a kitchen. She had a refrigerator filled with food that she had purchased, not stolen or begged for. She had clothes hanging in a closet that actually belonged to her. She had a shower with hot water that did not stop midway through. She had soap that smelled like lavender instead of harsh industrial soap from the shelter supplies. She also had nightmares. They came on a Tuesday, 16 days after Marcus Webb had been transported to a federal facility in northern Louisiana, awaiting trial on charges of kidnapping, assault, extortion, and conspiracy with a corrupt police lieutenant who had been fired and arrested within 48 hours of Webb's own apprehension. The nightmare pulled her from sleep, his hands on her throat, the sound of his voice, the weight of him, the smell of stale alcohol and rage. She woke screaming, her voice raw and broken, her body drenched in sweat even though the apartment was cool. The door to her bedroom opened before the scream had finished echoing off the walls. Nicholas stood in the darkness, silhouetted against the hallway light, a SIG sour in his right hand. In the half-second it took him to understand that there was no threat in the room, that the only danger was internal, he lowered the weapon and stepped inside. He was wearing sleep pants and nothing else, his chest bare, the raised scar running from his collarbone to his ribs visible even in the dimness. "You are safe," he said, his voice cutting through the panic like a blade. "He is 300 miles away. He cannot reach you." "I know," she whispered, but her hands were still shaking, her breath still coming in gasps, her mind still half-trapped in the nightmare where hands became chains and words became walls. Nicholas pulled the leather chair from her desk and positioned it beside the bed. He sat down, the gun resting on his thigh, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond her window. He did not speak. He did not touch her. He simply sat there, a silent wall between her and the night, until the sky began to lighten and the birds of New Orleans resumed their morning songs. "Thank you," she said as dawn crept across the floor. He nodded once and left without speaking. It happened for more times over the next 2 weeks. Each time, he came. Each time, he sat in silence while she trembled through the hours until daylight made the terror recede. On the 5th night, she did not wake screaming. She woke quietly, heart racing but breathing controlled, and found him already in the chair, waiting. "You knew I would wake," she said. "Yes," he replied. But it was not just the nightmares that changed during those weeks. It was the daylight hours. Valentina had begun working with Noah in earnest, tutoring him in reading and mathematics, taking him to the park where he fed pigeons and laughed at their scrambling, teaching him songs and showing him how to draw. The boy was brilliant, his mind hungry for information, his heart cautious but slowly, incrementally opening like a flower learning to trust the sun. One afternoon, while Valentina was preparing dinner in her small kitchen, Noah entered carrying a drawing he had made, a stick figure with red hair next to a taller stick figure with black hair, both of them holding hands beneath a yellow sun. "Is this you and me?" she asked gently. Noah nodded, his 7-year-old face serious with concentration. "Are you going to leave like everyone else?" The question was simple. The weight of it was a stone. Valentina set down the knife she had been using to chop vegetables and knelt to his level. She took his small hands in hers. "I am not going anywhere," she said. "I promise you, Noah. I am not going anywhere." He leaned forward and wrapped his arms around her neck, and she felt him inhale, as if breathing her in to confirm that she was real, that she would not dissolve the moment he blinked. "Okay," he whispered. The transformation rippled outward from that moment. Valentina began to truly become his teacher, his guide, his anchor. She taught him to read at a level 2 grades above his age. She taught him the names of constellations. She taught him to make pasta from scratch, her hands over his as they kneaded the dough. She taught him that trust was something you could rebuild, one moment at a time. Rocco and Sal noticed the change before Nicholas acknowledged it openly. It was Rocco who came to the kitchen one morning where Nicholas sat at the table, his fingers wrapped around a cup of black coffee, his eyes following Noah through the window as the boy ran across the gardens with Valentina, both of them laughing at some joke only they understood. "Boss, you good?" Rocco asked, his voice careful, as if he were approaching a wild animal that might startle. Nicholas did not tear his eyes away from the window. "Better than I've been in 9 years," he said quietly. The smile that lingered on his face was not what Rocco had expected. It was not triumphant or ruthless or dangerous. It was simply peaceful. But what no one knew, what Valentina would not discover until weeks later, was that Nicholas had made a decision that would reshape the entire trajectory of their lives. In the darkness of his office at 3 a.m., he had made phone calls that were setting events in motion, creating a future he had not allowed himself to imagine for almost a decade. One afternoon, Valentina was searching for one of Noah's school notebooks in a hallway closet when she opened a door she had not opened before. It led to a nursery. A room frozen in time. The crib was still there, its mobile still hanging, tiny animals suspended in perpetual flight. The walls were painted a soft blue. Shelves held stuffed animals arranged with impossible care, a giraffe with one ear slightly higher than the other, a bear with button eyes that had been carefully sewn on, a soft rabbit with a faded pink ribbon. There was a changing table. A dresser with clothes folded and stacked, clothes that had never been worn, clothes for a child who would never grow into them. Valentina stood motionless in the doorway, understanding in that moment what this room meant, what it had cost Nicholas Conti to leave it exactly as it was. "Why didn't you change it?" she asked when she found him that evening. They were in his study, and the question hung between them like a blade suspended in air. Nicholas was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because letting go meant admitting he was gone," he said. "And I could not." Valentina moved to sit beside him. She did not touch him, understanding in her bones that he was held together by threads so thin that even kindness might cause him to break. "He is not gone," she said. "He is in the next room. He is alive. He is here." The silence that followed was so complete that Valentina could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the rain that had begun to fall outside, could hear the sound of Nicholas Conti's chest as it shuddered, once, twice, and then his shoulders began to shake. She had never seen him cry before. She did not touch him as he broke, she simply sat beside him, a silent witness to his grief, until the storm passed and he was quiet again. "Help me change it," he said finally. "Help me turn it into something real." They did it together over the next weekend. They removed the crib and donated it to a women's shelter. They painted the walls a warmer color, a soft cream. They brought in furniture that belonged to a living boy, or a proper bed with blue sheets, a desk for his schoolwork, shelves for the books he was learning to love. Valentina hung artwork that Noah had created on the walls. It was transformation. It was redemption. It was a man learning to live in the present instead of drowning in the past. But what Valentina did not know was that while she was painting walls and selecting furniture, Nicholas Conti was making arrangements that would define the next year of their lives completely. He was speaking with architects. He was reviewing documents. He was making phone calls that would set everything in motion. The rain fell steadily against the windows of the apartment as Valentina painted, and she did not know that in exactly 365 days, everything would change again. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.